deep into the second chapter of the Gita. I think we're around text 40. Be my guess, maybe 41, something like that. Yeah. So just to recap, in 1 minute. The chapter started out with Krishna fomenting Arjuna's dark night of the soul and exacerbating the problem, prodding and poking and making fun of, minimizing Arjuna's dilemma, until Arjuna really broke down and was receptive. And then rather than dealing with the specifics of Arjuna's quite well-reasoned arguments about morality and happiness and family and loyalty and dharma, different types of dharma, tribal dharma and family dharma, and eternal dharma, Krishna just circumvented all of that entirely, because he saw a core misstep in Arjuna's calculation that skewed his entire worldview. Much like if you point a gun off, a few inches off, and then you move 20 feet out, bullets flying over there. And that ability to spot those shifts from a well-reasoned or accurate worldview into a surreal or skewed or fantastical or unreasonable worldview, it's a sign of brilliance when you can spot somebody when they start to go off. And so, anyway, Arjuna had spent some time unpacking his point of view, so Krishna was able to easily notice what had happened. There was quite a bit of argument from Arjuna's side in the first chapter. And so rather than deal with the specifics of Arjuna's arguments, Krishna just gutted them, skewered them, so to speak, and pointed out that you're not the body. And that this whole incredible amount of energy that people dedicate towards trivial pursuits, towards small things of little import, things that don't ultimately matter, Arjuna was typifying that and exemplifying that and epitomizing that. And so Krishna just did a whole paradigm shift, a radical cognitive reframing. And you're not the body. Then he went back, touched on Arjuna's arguments, and then after he touched on Arjuna's arguments, he segued very smoothly back into his train of thought, Krishna's train of thought. So Krishna's train of thought, with the little segue, with the little tangent to go back and button up Arjuna's point of view and button up Arjuna's specific arguments after having put the entire discussion on more solid ground, there was just a very small detour. Krishna has a game plan. He has a direction he wants to take the conversation. So the direction Krishna wants to take the conversation is extremely simple. It is an idea, a cognitive element, a philosophical notion, a worldview And that worldview, in the simplest of terms, is that you are not the body, you are a spirit soul. That's an idea. That's a philosophical notion. That's a paradigm. It's a worldview. And then once you do the cognitive thing, then the thing that comes after the cognitive thing is the behavioral component. Cognitive behavioral therapy. You work on the way we view things, and then you work on the way we engage in the world. This is what therapists do. That's the standard. It's the gold standard, the benchmark. I mean, there are things like psychoanalytic theory, Freudian, neo-Freudian. You could become a psychoanalyst. There's a humanist movement, which I think was really the precursor to the cognitive behavioral model. Maybe that and the behaviorism that preceded it came together and became the cognitive behavioral model. But it's the norm. And even if people say they're a psychoanalyst or they're this or that, ultimately they end up doing cognitive behavioral therapy. I would say 95% of therapy these days follows that basic model. It follows that basic model almost out of necessity, because what do you really want to do if you go see a therapist? What's a therapist's goal going to be with you? It's going to be to, number one, shift your perspective, and then number two, shift your behavior. People got behaviors they don't want to engage in, some kind of negative coping mechanisms or negative patterns of behavior they want to route out, deal with, heal from. And then that's inevitably traceable to incorrect views about themselves and the world. And so you got to burn that candle at both ends. You got to pick out a few behaviors to try and modify, and then you got to deal with the underlying worldview that led to those behaviors in the first place. And those two things together are the essence of therapy. It's not merely cognitive. It's not merely the way you view the world. There's always, by the time you go to see a therapist, you're not merely disturbed by your covert thoughts, but rather your covert thoughts are matched up with overt, at least bubblingly overt manifestations of those covert issues. No one's able to just think negatively all the time and not have it affect the way they behave in the world with their words and actions. And so the reason why cognitive behavioral therapy is such a standard is because it's the essence of what therapy has always been. Sometimes people come up with weird ideas, but if you just look at the basics of human experience and how to uplift yourself, either you uplift your activities or you uplift your thoughts. And if you uplift your thoughts, your activities are generally sure to follow. And if you uplift your activities, then generally speaking, your mood and your thoughts become elevated as well. Each one complements the other. So now you got Krishna's back to his game plan. And his game plan is extremely simple. So although he fomented Arjuna's dilemma, although he was, toying with Arjuna a little bit on the front end, although he ignored Arjuna's point of view, radically altered it, although he argued in Upanishadic language, although he looked at a number of different worldviews, such as an atheistic worldview, although he dabbled back in Arjuna's original train of thought and dealt with some of the arguments about fame and fortune favors the brave, and doors to heaven and Valhalla and stuff like that. Although he did some of that, and it would seem like there's been a number of different roads that Krishna's walked down thus far, 40 verses into the second chapter. The truth is the second chapter is extremely simple. There's a few detours, but Krishna has a very simple thing he wants to share with Arjuna. And that's a dangerous idea, notion, philosophy, worldview, paradigm. And simply put, that is that you're not the body, you are a soul. And then the next thing is, now that you know that you're not the body and you're a soul, how are you going to behave? Think about I got a beautiful handwritten letter from a Jehovah's Witness today, sharing the gospel and asking to engage. And they're quite sophisticated in their approach. I mean, the handwritten note is brilliant. And they said, I wanted to ask you some questions about what's going on in the world today and get your thoughts, get your valued opinion. They've really they've really cleaned up their act. If you didn't see that jw.org, you'd think like, oh, who are these people? I'd like to get to know them. And you see the jw.org and you're like, okay, I got it. I know where this is going. But let's just think about a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon that knocks on your door. And what do? They say, I want to share good news. There was a person named Jesus Christ, and he died for your sins. Of course, you could respond back, I didn't ask him to do that. Sounds like some kind of masochist. I don't want to hang out with a person like that. Sounds like he's got a savior complex. Delusions of grandeur, messianic complex. Sounds like a millenarian cult to me, if I ever heard of one. I'm over this. So I don't think that would be an unreasonable reaction. I mean, imagine if you knock somebody's door and say, hey, there's a guy named Fred in Ojai, and he died for your sins. You'd be like, Fred sounds like a disturbed individual. I wish he would have gotten help. I wish he would have, 5150'd himself. No, he allowed other people to torture him on your behalf. That sounds even worse. Like, who are these awful people that tortured him? Let's get them thrown in prison. And this guy Fred, sounds like the village idiot over here. What was he doing? Sounds like a sadist, metamasochist, and they had a party, and I don't want any part of that. So just leave me out of this one. I don't think that's an unusual reaction. They kind of have to drop in that he's the Son of God to make the whole thing epic and not have it just sound super sad and pathetic, right? You could also respond and say, I don't believe people can die for your sins. I don't believe it works like that. I don't believe you're allowed to just have someone else suffer in your stead. A benchmark of our legal system that I believe in that's relatively new, and I can understand why you guys would have thought this way stupidly years ago because you still believe in slavery. It's all over your sacred text, so obviously you guys are way behind the times. You believe in slavery, and so obviously if you believe in slavery, you'd have a bunch of other stupid attendant ideas, one of which is you can have person A or person B get punished for person A's sins. That's dumb. You're not allowed to do that. I think that would also be a reasonable reaction to say, I don't believe that's philosophically possible. I don't think that's how karma works. So the guy could just jump in and go, I'll suffer your karma for you, and just all of a sudden your karma's gone and you're redeemed. Which, by the way, is the very, very precise theological term used in Christianity that's originally an English term that specifically is what Jesus did for you. Salvation is different. That's synergistic, at least within Catholicism. That's synergistic. You have to participate. But the redemption happened automatically. All your sins were forgiven. Then you decide if you want to be exalted, if you want to go upwards and achieve salvation. But the freedom from your sins, that was an automatic act. Jesus just went ahead and paid the debt for the whole planet. I'd also argue that why? How is it that just getting nails driven through your hand and laying on a cross for a couple days and bleeding out, how does that quantitatively add up to the sins and the pain and suffering of the entire planet? That seems ridiculous to me also. How is it that by the simple act of being impaled through your hands and feet and being hung to bleed out for a couple of days, something which was quite common during the Roman Empire's heyday? Sometimes they even put you upside down. That sounds way more hellish. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to minimize the wounds of Christ. It sounds totally hellish. I'm not saying, sign me up or anything like that. But I am saying that if you were to weigh that against the pain that the world goes through on any given day, I don't think it equates to it. I don't think it equates to it on even a day. I don't think it even adds up to the pain of the world in a given day. There's probably a bunch of other people getting crucified on that very day. I mean, there were. Jesus had a couple of cohorts that he got crucified with. But I'm saying in other ports of call throughout the Roman Empire, I'm assuming other people were getting crucified or boiled in oil or thrown to lions. They had a bunch of stuff they did. So, Jehovah's Witness knocks on the door and they say, hey, I want to tell you about a person named Jesus Christ who died for your sins. I think the things I've said are a few reasonable reactions. Number one is, sounds like a masochist with a savior complex. And then number two is, I don't think that's possible. And number three is, quantitatively, it doesn't seem to really add up. I don't think he was suffered enough to count for the sins of the whole world. It's funny, isn't it? Normally you talk about the passion, the suffering of Christ. It's this incredible event, but why was it? It's not like he was shot 5 billion times. It's not like he, had his arms cut off and they grew back and they were cut off again for all eternity. It wasn't like something like that where you could say, that does sound like infinite suffering. Then what you do is, so if you really want to say it, just going up to somebody and saying, there's a person named Jesus Christ who died for your sins, that presumes that the person already knows what you're talking about. Otherwise, the real thing is, God sent his only begotten Son who then, because he was God's Son, was capable of, while undergoing this apparent crucifixion, actually he was suffering billions of times more than just the crucifixion. And he was, through the medium of the crucifixion, suffering infinitely for all the sins of all mankind. You see that? You have to throw in that mythic, epic thing in order for it to make sense. God gave his only begotten Son. He suffered on your behalf because he loved you so much, didn't want you to suffer. And thereby, he opened the door that wouldn't have been opened otherwise for salvation. The debt got too big, so he jumped in and interceded. Now, there's a few different possible reactions to that information. But you could doubt whether it's true. You could doubt whether such a thing is possible, whether an all-good and all-powerful God would let somebody else suffer for your sins, whether that's even healthy. I mean, there's, some of the things I've surveyed and some other ideas. But let's say that you bought into it. You're good. Let's say that you bought into it, and you believe that. Let's say you bought into the idea that, you believe in slavery or some evolutive slavery, some derivative concepts of slavery, that people can suffer for your sins, pay your debts for you. Karma works like that. You believe in that legal system. Let's say you believe that God exists. Let's say you believe he did give his only begotten Son. Let's say you believe he suffered billions of times more. Let's say he did that out of pure love for you. And let's say it did open the door of salvation for you. Once that idea is accepted by you as being true, it starts to necessitate a particular reaction. If you believe that your slate's been wiped clean, you've been given another chance, the natural emotion would be intense gratitude. That's it. And that gratitude would then manifest in the way you lived your life. Go from here and sin no more. When Jesus saved the prostitute, told her, go from here, sin no more. You caught this lucky break. Somebody interceded on your behalf, helped you. If you get that, if you feel the appropriate gratitude, somebody saved you. You can't just go and live a life of trivial pursuits because you are standing on the shoulders of giants. Somebody gave their life for you that you might live. You see the power in an idea, the power in a cognitive reframing, in an idea, in a notion. And so, even when a Jehovah's Witness comes and knocks on your door and gives you the tired old spiel, the reason why it's a tired old spiel and you find it unconvincing is because you've heard it before and decided that's not my thing. You've examined it and found it lacking in terms of its reasonability or logic or even beauty. You found it to be an impoverished notion of divinity. But for 3 billion people in the world, roughly half the world's population, that idea is powerful. It was convincing to them or their parents. They accepted it. And it changes the world in which they live and the ground that they walk on and the earth that they stand on. Ideas are incredibly powerful. Like the floor is lava. If you accept that idea that the floor is lava, if you actually believe that the floor is lava, your whole interaction with the floor changes immediately. The moment you hear the floor is lava, if you actually believe that, I imagine if you were, I don't know, you were given some potassium, The suggestion drug, what is it? Sodium pentothal, thank you. You give them some sodium pentothal, you're in a doped up suggestive state, and you give them sodium pentothal, and this is the world I live in, yes. I went there. And somebody said the floor is lava, and you accepted the floor is lava. Immediately you'd be like, oh. You would never again put your feet down on the floor. You'd never put your feet down on the floor. You'd be jumping from this to that, you know? You'd have to live life, but life would change instantly. You follow? Ideas are powerful. Dumb ideas are also powerful, because there's a lot of stupid people in the world who believe dumb ideas. But even for intelligent people, good ideas are dangerous too. Because once you encounter them, you don't go back. You don't see the world the same way. So Krishna threw down a dangerous idea. The idea is you're not the body. You are a soul. And now he's going to flesh out how you should then go and live your life, having encountered that pre-theistic, but still very challenging, spiritual idea. Interestingly enough, although Christianity believes you are the body, and therefore you have to bury your dead so you can be resurrected, and the dust can become a person again, if you follow a Thomistic model, which is why the Christians and the Muslims bury their dead, because you're going to get resurrected from the actual, your body, consuma, where the spirit is then going to be infused in it, it's going to be live forever. I find it to be just a really bad idea about the afterlife. I think a much better idea about the afterlife is just to sever consciousness from the body, view the body as a vehicle, view consciousness separate. I don't see any benefit whatsoever into believing the actual resurrection of your corporeal frame with some spirit shook up on it. You got to still shake the spirit on it. That's the consuma with spirit. I don't see any benefit in not just saying you are the spirit. It just, again, seems like a really poor conception. Really impoverished. But irrespective of my dislike for Thomistic notions about you are the body exactly, and consciousness and the body are one, which I don't even find passing evidence for that. I find prima facie evidence for that would warrant further investigation. I think the default position is you're not the body if you actually look at your consciousness, which is what gave rise to the mind-body dualism and the phenomenal and numinous world and René Descartes and really the entire Enlightenment period, where people realized that we could study the body, but it's different than saying the mind. You have to put the mind in its separate category. So even though I find Christianity to have one of the weakest conceptions of self, for the reasons I just outlined, ultimately they're saying the same thing, just in a super awkward, this kind of manner. They're saying that there's life beyond this world. Therefore, this world isn't all there is. Therefore, functionally, you exist beyond this world in perpetuity, in transcendence. There are certain forms of Christianity that say you just are nothing, and that's hell. It's just you become non-existent. That's hell. Versus the lake of fire people. Versus the limbo group, where you're in purgatory. Somebody can save you later on. There's a purgatory group where you're in limbo and you can be saved later on. There's you're going to burn in a lake of fire or this or that forever. And then there's you go to some eternal darkness and you just cease to exist. Maybe there's other schools too, but those are the three main ones. And so, but then for the saved ones, for the chosen ones, there's eternal life. There's the potential for eternal life. And so what's really being said there? Well, you exist forever. What exists forever? Your body with some umami, it's like a spirit-like flavor powder shook on top of it, or you are made up of the flavor powder, you are consciousness, which is non-material. Whichever way you frame it, it's the same principle. Did you guys follow that? Let me say it again. You guys were distracted. Whether you say that you can live forever, because we're going to resurrect your body and somehow take the food out of those worms' mouths and resurrect it into the body you had when you were on this planet, and then we're going to sprinkle some eternity on top of it, some eternity dust that's going to make you live forever. Or whether you say you just are an eternal being and therefore you have the possibility of living forever, or you do live forever, and you have the possibility of understanding that and standing in that glory and that beauty. You're saying the same thing. And so, even the Christians, with one of the worst conceptions of self I've encountered from a spiritual tradition, ultimately has the same basics. You're not the body only. There's a potential for something else. Even though they would say you are the body, then they would say, but the body can live forever, which means functionally, you're not the body as you, generally speaking, experience it as a temporary manifestation of matter that will, in due course of time, be rent asunder and become cosmic dust. Did you guys follow that? So really, all spiritual groups have this point in common. You're not the body. There's something more. There's a life beyond this life. There's something bigger going on. And the result of embracing that notion in any tradition of the world is all of a sudden, what you have for dinner, what color clothes you wear, what kind of car you drive, or how you decorate your kid's room, or what hairstyle you go for, all that stuff becomes way less important. Because there's something really big going on in this lifetime that's really important. And that's what you should focus your energy on. In that sense, all spiritual traditions have this same potential of radically relegating the material world to a lower platform. You know, they say there's no moderate Islam. There's moderate Muslims. But the very tradition of Islam is the implementation and the forced implementation of Sharia. And so it's a political system. It's a theocratic political system, but it's a series of laws, of crimes and punishments, of rules for non-Muslims, of punishments for adultery, for homosexuality. It's a rule of punishment. And the first day of the Islamic calendar is the day that Muhammad conquered Medina and established Sharia law in the new statelet of Medina that he ruled over as a warlord, who forced and subjugated those under him and made them follow his rules. Non-Muslims had to pay a jizya, Muslims paid a zakat. And, you know, there's a whole culture of what it meant to be a dhimmi, a non-Muslim living in Dar al-Salam, a country which was ruled according to Muhammad's laws. And none of the major four schools of Islamic jurisprudence have ever repudiated or said we don't believe that what the Prophet did was the right thing. They all still believe in Sharia. So if you become a Muslim, and the Pew Group, I think is what they're called, who's one of the largest pollers in the world, they studied Muslims about 10 years ago. 600 million Muslims believe in terrorist acts. 33% of Muslims around the world globally. Much less, obviously, as a Muslim population of Europe and the US, but if you look globally, that's your numbers. And then the numbers start to grow from there. 700 million believe that Sharia laws, maybe 600 million believe that Sharia law is for everyone, whether you're a Muslim or not. Then the numbers, same numbers, a little bit more, that if you convert away from Islam, you should be killed. Then it gets something like 700-800 million believe in the hudud, which is the standard punishments, cutting off the hand of a thief and things like that. Then 1 billion believe that women shouldn't be allowed to inherit property. And the numbers just, a vast, huge amount of the Islamic population when polled. And that's when they're polled. Imagine what they think when they're not being polled by a secular group. So, if you're a Muslim, there's always the possibility that you might get a little radical, because Muhammad himself was quite radical. And given the importance which is placed on him as being an ideal person, worthy of being followed, then Jesus is followed in terms of his compassion, his mercy. Jesus wasn't a warlord, a slave-owning warlord, who then wrote about slave-owning and being a warlord and subjugating people, and that was the religious text, was his exploits doing that. So to follow Jesus is like an internal thing. And there's a little bit of that. This is internal jihad. So it's not that that stuff isn't there in Islam to be explored. But what's also there is this idea, hey, I become pious, therefore I should start to follow Sharia and make other people follow Sharia, which is why when you look at places like Indonesia or Turkey, let's go with Indonesia, where Islam spread there without any war. Largest Muslim population in the world, I believe, is in Indonesia. Almost half the world's Muslims live there. Huge Muslim population. Spread entirely through trade. Indonesia was Hindu. Islam spread there through trade. But now, all over Indonesia, they have these Sharia vans. They drive around, if they see a woman, an Indonesian woman, walking around with her head covered, they'll pull over, hand her a piece of cloth, say, put on right now. In Nigeria, they started stoning adulteresses to death. You get this, where people, even if the place is secular and it doesn't have an Islamic government, extrajudicially, the Islamic community begins to organize itself and implement the rules of Sharia because that's their tradition. You follow this? And Turkey, although the entire population of Turkey, practically speaking, is Muslim, which is strange because it was the Orthodox center of the world for quite some time. For Christianity. Although almost the entire population of Turkey is Muslim, it's considered to be a house of war by pious Muslims because they have a secular government and they refuse to Islamize and become theocratic. So there's a lot of terrorist activity in Turkey because Muslims want to establish, a theocratic society that follows Sharia law, but Turkey is a secular government. And the U.S., of course, is super in tight with Turkey. Has a bunch of military bases there. It's one of our surround the Middle East. We surrounded Russia with NATO, and then we've also surrounded the Middle East also, because we view that as being essential to the West. So we control the Western Hemisphere and all of South America. Then we surrounded Russia with NATO. And now we surround the Middle East as well, so that anything that goes on there, we're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from. And Turkey is one of our strongholds. So, however you become a Muslim, there's always this possibility that you might radicalize because it's in your tradition, in the bones of your tradition. No Jews are saying, we believe in slavery. That stuff has been written out of the Torah in the rabbinic commentaries for thousands of years. No Christians say, we still believe in slavery. It's in our text, therefore we believe we should reinstitute it. That stuff has been repudiated, it's been denied, it's been said that that's not the core of our teachings, that's not what we're about. Islam's never done that. None of the major denominations of Islam have interpreted the Quran like that or the Hadith like that. And so there's always this potential. That was just some fodder. Similarly, here's a point I wanted to make. Similarly, once you accept that you're not the body, you're just waiting to radicalize into a true spiritualist. You could say you're not the body, but you should live in this world and enjoy as much as possible. But at some point, the idea that you're not the body, you're like, wait a second, if I live in this world and enjoy, what value is that ultimately to me? That's not who I really am. It's a dangerous idea, and the idea is always waiting. So even if you came up with a religion, a version of Christianity or a version of spirituality that said, enjoy as much as possible, enjoy God's gifts to you, this and that, at some point, people are going to start thinking, but I'm not this body. I'm not of this world. There's something beyond this world. I'm wasting my time thinking about this world. I should be thinking about that world. What am I doing? I'm languishing here. I'm wasting my time. Let me do something more valuable with my life. That insidious, incipient, seed-like potential is there once you accept you're not the body. It rattles around in your brain, undigested forever, until it finally hits pay dirt and gets a little sprinkle of water in the form of some suffering or some pensiveness, some thoughtfulness, and all of a sudden sprouts the most dangerous idea. Maybe I'm not this body. Maybe this world isn't all there is. Maybe I'm wasting my time by focusing on these things and not focusing on what's really going on. Not focusing on the world. Wasting my time focusing on the world instead of focusing on what's going on the surface, the reality. Ideas are dangerous. And I don't mean dangerous in a bad sense. I mean dangerous in the sense that they can really subvert and change your reality. By radicalizing you. And then what is radicalizing just depends on your tradition. If your tradition was about establishing Sharia law, then radicalizing means you start doing that. If your tradition's about radical renunciation, then it means you start doing that. And that's why all religions ultimately have these groups of renunciates, because the religions of the world have this core idea that there's something beyond this world. And so even if they do a hybridized material version and tell you to enjoy your senses in the name of what God wanted you to do, this and that, there's always going to be a group of people or an age group or circumstances which will make people see through the incongruence of that idea. It'll create cognitive dissonance, and they'll start to realize that the core ideas of their tradition don't match up with that lifestyle, and they'll be forced to change it. Did you guys follow this? Krishna, in many ways, is trying to radicalize us here. He introduced a dangerous idea, you're not the body, and then he's going to now spell out the consequences of that dangerous idea. Do you guys follow this? That's the second chapter. It's extremely simple. One idea, you're not the body, and then the ramifications of that idea on how you're going to live the rest of your life. And instead of waiting for that to ping pong around in your brain and maybe take hold, Krishna's going to try to foment that and lead you to water. So he starts off and we're going to roll through it now. He starts off and he says, in this endeavor there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So that's exciting. That's telling you that, hey, there is a real benefit. There's a real return on your investment. There's a great ROI here, right? There's a huge ROI. You know, like crypto. Crypto had this amazing ROI. You know, 10 years ago, Bitcoin was worth less than a penny. Maybe it was 12 years ago, whatever. Worth less than a penny. A lot less than a penny. And then it peaked up around 65,000, 70,000, somewhere in that neighborhood a few months ago. And so people who invested in it would have made thousands and hundreds of thousands of times their money. They bought it when it was worth less than a penny, and now it's worth $66,000. Then they made 660,000 times their money, which is, what is it? 60 million % return on your investment? I think that's what that comes out to. 1 penny becomes 66,000, so you got to multiply that times 100. So now you're 6 million. You got to, because that's for the penny to the dollar. So that's 6 million times your money, and then you got to, so it's like 600 million % return on your investment. I think that's the numbers, if I got it right. But then it lost, 2/3 of its value in a couple of months, because that's just, there's a lack of stability there. That's what happens with that kind of incredible, the NFTs are going through the same thing, this radical writing of the marketplace, aided by the recession. So there's a pretty, Krishna's saying there's a great ROI here. You work a little bit with this idea that you're not the body. You practice this thing I'm going to teach you called yoga. I'm going to tell you what it is. But if you practice it, you'll be delivered from fear. You'll be fearless. You'll live a life free from fear. You'll connect with something powerful enough to make you unafraid. And that's true. I don't have any more existential doubt. I haven't had existential doubt in, it's got to be 25, 30 years. Maybe the first few years I was a devotee. But I don't have that anymore. I don't know about you guys, but at least for me as a moderately serious Hare Krishna devotee, I don't experience incredible confusion, incredible doubt, self-doubt, nihilistic ideas, a lack of clarity. Sometimes I got to go talk to people about things I'm not quite sure how to play it, but in terms of the overall clarity of my life is crystal clear, and it just gets more crystal clear as the days go on. Sometimes I have a hard time doing the right thing. Sometimes I mess up, fall short of my values, my ideals. Have to pick myself up, dust myself off, keep moving forward. But in terms of doubts about the world in which I live, doubts about the big questions of life, I never suffer from them. That whole aspect of life that most people are completely vexed by and confounded by, I feel playful and excited and creative in that universe. I don't have the confidence of an exclusivistic Christian that I'm going to heaven, and the smugness that leads to, and the condescension towards others. But I feel really creative and free philosophically, and unafraid of what happens when you die, unafraid of old age, unafraid of disease and death. I'll have to pony up. Haven't died yet, so I'll have to go through that. But I'm not worried about it. I've watched my gurus pass away. I've watched my elders pass away. I've watched them be blessed, grace descend upon them, everything work out perfectly. And I've got a lot of confidence that will happen in my life too. I'm not afraid of growth. I'm not afraid of being wrong. I'm not afraid of being a work in progress. So this idea that this will save you from the greatest type of fear, that's just would be a practical manifestation of that idea. And I would assume, I would guess that most of you have at least something of that in your life. Some kind of clarity, some deep sense of knowing that's growing that allows you to look at ideas that crush other people. And they don't crush you anymore. You're adept. You stay playful. They can't control you. Those ideas don't pin you down anymore. You've discovered how to keep yourself playful in that space. Like in jiu-jitsu, the first rule is don't let anybody control you too much. If they can't control you, then you can play with them. You can stay creative. There's always multiple avenues out. But when you get pinned down, then your motion becomes severely mitigated, and then all of a sudden you have way less options available to you, right? And so one of the fruits of Krishna consciousness, even I would say just like a low intermediate level, not the fanatical, I know everything that you can get in 5 minutes, but like a low intermediate level where you've gotten over that phase, is that you're never just flabbergasted and confounded ever again, because you've inherited a legacy of thought that empowers you to navigate life boldly, powerfully. And if you just think about your own life and the kind of doubts you have now versus the kind of suffocating doubts you used to suffer, where you just truly had no idea which end was up. Because I can remember that in my own life. That's worth the price of admission all on its own. A little advancement, saves you from the most dangerous type of fear. There it is, proven. Look no further in your own life. Those on this path are resolute in purpose. Their aim is one. The intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So don't think it's cheap, though. A carrot and a stick. Don't think it's cheap. You got to be focused. Don't get too splayed out. Decide, I want to be perfect in yoga. Don't get too spun out. How do people get spun out? That's a natural question you could ask Krishna. What's this whole many-branched thing? Bahu shaka, hyanantascha. The unlimited many branches of the vyavasai, of the determination, of the irresolute, the avyavasai. What's their determination like? What confounds them? Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation of heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification, opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional services supreme does not take place. Samadhi na vidhyate. They're not able to achieve samadhi. Who? Those who are bhog aishwarya prasaktanam, who are too attached to enjoyment and opulence. What are they attached to? They're Veda Vada Rata. They're attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, the Pushpam Bhaksham, the flowery words of the Vedas. What's going on here? Krishna is critiquing the Veda. The Veda, the majority of the Veda, is about if you want a good wife or a good husband or riches or success or this or that, do this sacrifice and you will get that thing. It's a business relationship with God. It's a ritual cult. You do this ritual and you get this result. That's what the Veda is primarily about. Krishna is starting off the Gita with a criticism of the Veda, which is very, very common in the Upanishads. It's a criticism of the general materialistic culture of the Veda. So you've got the Veda. The Veda primarily teaches rituals to help you get things you want, and then you pay for the ritual, and that's a way of establishing a link between you getting what you want and you have to pay somebody above you, namely God, as exemplified by the priest who performs a yajna on your behalf to propitiate the deity on your behalf and interface between man and God. It's kind of standard all over all religions of the world. You get it? And Krishna's saying that whole thing is bogus because it means you just want to be a materialist. And so if that's what you want out of your religion, this isn't going to work. That's that many branched. I want this, I want that, I want the other thing. That materialism will ruin your spiritual life. That's why I said you got to be at least a low intermediate devotee. If you are a gross materialist, this won't work because your gross materialism will functionally make you an atheist. You will functionally be, and now that you're just hoping that idea bounces around your head and then eventually hits pay dirt and gets the water of some suffering on it, and then you start to think there must be more life than this. Krishna wants to make your path easier. He wants to supersede most people's journey of becoming super materialistic and then suffering and then taking a spiritual life. He wants to give you the radical idea and then get you to just jump in right off the bat. And so how does he try to get you to jump in? He takes a big swipe, a big shot, makes a big challenge to, takes a big swipe at the Vedas and materialism in the name of religion. You see what he's doing? Because you have materialistic religion. If it has that ideal, people are always going to be in danger of radicalizing, but it doesn't mean they'll radicalize right away. They got to think it through and realize how discordant their lifestyle is with their ultimate value system, and get that cognitive dissonance and get really uncomfortable with it and then be forced to confront it, usually because they've suffered. Krishna wants to spare you from that. And so he just criticizes materialism. And this is why a critique of materialism is always a part of a good Hare Krishna discussion. Because without being materially exhausted, without turning away from materialism, you'll never really be able to turn to spirituality, because they're inversely proportioned, because matter and spirit are antonyms. The material world can be used by a spiritualist, but being materialistic and being spiritual is literally just saying being black and being white, being open and being closed. It's opposite ideas. And Krishna understands that. These are foundational concepts behind any spiritual movement. That's why Jesus says it's easier to thread a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to go back to heaven. These ideas were there. The early Christians would carry a knapsack. No, the Stoics would carry a knapsack with all their belongings in it. The Christians wouldn't even do that. They would just walk around barefoot through Galilee, spreading the gospel, the good word, which brings us back full circle to the nice, at least homage to that tradition in the form of the Jehovah's Witnesses who knock on doors now. Ultimately, the early Christians just walked around, carrying nothing with them except for their faith as their most valuable possession and sharing that with the world. There's something very beautiful, very romantic about this idea of spirituality, people taking it very, very seriously. And that's what Krishna's espousing, a very, very serious version of spirituality. Thank you, IGTV.